Hey everyone, Chris here, and this is a little update on the Naja. You saw my unboxing of that a little while ago, and it is an interesting aircraft. Um, the initial flights were very difficult, I would say. It is a nice built aircraft. I was actually expecting it to fly a lot like the Skywalker 2014 1800mm wingspan that the wings are built after. The entire size and everything is the same as the Skywalker, so I was expecting pretty much the same performance. I loaded it up the same. I believe it was right around 1,500 to 1,700 grams of weight, and that included just a single 5,000 milliamp. The one thing I noticed was on its first launch, it felt tail heavy, and that was I had the CG set the exact same as the Skywalker. So I brought it forward a little bit just because the V-tail doesn't have as much lift back there. So I brought it forward a tiny bit, and that helped out. It just became very sensitive. So I had to find a good balance between those 2 points. And it seemed like it had a lot of issues with stalling. I don't know if it was too slow. I was flying around right at 40 miles an hour. So I don't know if that's too slow for the aircraft. There's not too much information out there on it yet. But 40 to 50 miles an hour, it just seemed a little wild, I guess you could say. It sort of did what it wanted. There were times where control was very minimal, so you really had to throw your controls to get it to react to what you wanted to do. But then there were also times where it would be too sensitive. So you'd be banking hard to turn because it's not wanting to, and then all of a sudden it'll just snap in and you'll be rolling. So it did have some strange tendencies. The other thing, I did not like the lower pod because they don't have any support down to it. It's basically the foam pod with a wood spar in it and nothing connecting it. So you have a wood plate on the top, wood plate on the bottom, one in the center, but no actual wood structure through the whole thing. So now every time you land, you're just compressing that foam and breaking it down. Mine actually, after 3 landings, the entire bottom ripped out of it just because of that, and they were very soft landings. The first 2 were extremely soft. There's almost no way to land any softer because I landed in 3 feet of grass and pretty much brought it in an inch off the ground before letting it drop. And so there was no actual impact. It wasn't sliding across the gravel or across asphalt or anything like that. It was an extremely soft landing, but it still started showing fractures. And so I basically flew it to find out how it would actually be. I didn't want to baby this. I wanted a true review of if someone bought it, expected to be able to fly it all the time and go. So I did 3 flights on it. 3rd flight ended up, the pod actually started tearing in flight, which became uncontrollable. And upon landing, it landed extremely hard due to the pod loose, as well as it was very sensitive to tailwind. So coming into land, the field I was flying on has a major issue with different wind, I guess you could say. Every once in a while it'll just change from one direction to the other. I think it's because of how the trees are in the area I was flying. So flying in, coming upwind, ended up getting hit by a tailwind right before landing, which threw it into sort of a flat spin. But I'm thinking the critical failure was actually the pod was tearing, which was affecting center of gravity. So some of the things I thought of is I had my battery in the top section, which when you're landing puts a lot more weight on the center piece. But then if you think of it in the opposite, if you have your battery on the bottom, now you're relying on that pod to hold the weight of your battery the entire time you're flying around. When before I had it actually strapped to the spar. So battery was not going anywhere and it wasn't putting any weight on the lower pod during flight. So I don't know where exactly they wanted the battery to be strapped. I did have a small battery pack for the FPV gear in the bottom. But overall, it's lacking in design and concept. There are a few other concepts out there that we've seen some tempting footage of, I guess you could say. So we'll see how those come about and if they've addressed any better support for that bottom pod. It definitely has some capability, and the concept works really well. In the 3 flights that I did, which ranged right around 15-20 minutes, I barely used any of my pack. That 5,000 milliamp 4 cell, I ended up using right around 1,000 milliamps for all of those. That's 3 takeoffs. So it did really well on efficiency, but it has a lot more lacking in it. So hopefully Skywalker can get some sort of better support for that, and also some sort of better bottom for it. Because right now, if you actually land, there's no protection on the bottom of the pod. So if you land on asphalt, you're going to shred the pod completely apart. If you land on gravel, you're going to damage it. Basically, if you land on anything besides catching it or grass, you're going to destroy the bottom pod because there's nothing in it. There's no shield, there's no like plastic coating, there's no wood spar down it, no wheel, nothing down there to keep the foam from impacting whatever you land on. So, a couple things for them to work on: supporting the bottom pod, maybe some sort of assembly to protect the bottom, even if it was like a heavy or a thick plastic or something, just as a slide. That would definitely work. I see a lot of potential in it, but they need to address those. So watch for updates on it. Hopefully we hear more.